The brunch was, as always, an exercise in performance art. We were at a new, painfully chic cafe in Bonifacio Global City where the lighting was designed for selfies and the prices were designed for extortion. Polished concrete floors, raw wood, tables, and an abundance of fiddle-leaf figs in terracotta pots. It was the kind of place that screamed effortless, which, of course, required a tremendous amount of effort. Just like my friends, I sat on a minimalist birchwood chair. That was profoundly uncomfortable, nursing a flat white that cost more than my lunch budget for 3 days. Opposite me was the holy trinity of my post-college social life, Bianca, Katrina, and Chloe. We'd all met at university a decade ago, but our paths had diverged so sharply, it felt like we were from different planets orbiting the same distant memory of friendship. Bianca Yulo was the sun around which the others orbited. She was sharp, beautiful in a severe way, and dressed in a cream-colored silk pantsuit that probably cost more than my rent. Her success was her husband's, but she wore it like her own, running a lifestyle consultancy firm that mostly involved telling other rich people what to buy. She held her phone like a scepter, her thumb scrolling with a predatory restlessness. Katrina was the hustler. Dressed in a pinstriped blazer, she was a senior associate at a big law firm in Makati, and she never let you forget it. She spoke in bullet points, measured her life in billable hours, and viewed sleep as a sign of weakness. Her idea of relaxing was networking at a slightly different venue. And then there was Chloe, the heiress. Chloe's family owned half the sugar plantations in Negros, and she was blessed with the languid, beautiful boredom of someone who had never wanted for anything. She was draped in linen, her fingers heavy with rings, her face a mask of polite ennui as she poked at a quinoa salad she had no intention of eating. And me? I was Clara Santos, the writer. Their resident charity case, their pet intellectual, their court jester, the boring one. Clara, darling, you're a million miles away, Bianca said, her voice a silken blade. She snapped her fingers, playfully in front of my face. Thinking up your next little masterpiece? The other two chuckled on cue. I gave a small, non-committal smile, just thinking. She's always just thinking, Chloe sighed, pushing a single grain of quinoa around her plate. It must be so quiet in your head. Unlike yours, Chloe, which is clearly a raging party, Katrina quipped without looking up from her phone, where she was firing off an email, a conversation. As it often did, turned to their lives, a dizzying carousel of ski trips to Japan, condominium renovations, corporate takeovers, and the scandalous affairs of people I'd never met. I was a spectator, a professional nodder. My role was to listen, to absorb their triumphs and dramas, and to offer a blank slate against which they could see their own dazzling reflections. They didn't want my opinions. They wanted my attention. It was the price of admission to their circle. Oh God, that reminds me, Bianca suddenly exclaimed, putting her phone down with a dramatic clack. My cousin is setting me up with her husband's business partner. He's recently single, a bit of a workaholic, apparently. Head of acquisitions at some tech firm. She paused, then turned her full, laser-like focus on me. Actually, Clara, you're single. You're available. The word hung in the air like a bad smell. Available, like a vacant apartment for rent. I don't think of tech acquisitions. Guy is really my type B, I said softly, hoping to deflect. Oh, darling, don't be silly. She scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. Beggars can't be choosers. And you've been single for what, 3 years now? It's not healthy. You need to get out more. You can't just sit in your little apartment with your books all day. My little apartment is where I live, I said, my voice tighter than I intended. And my books are my work. Of course your work, Katrina said, finally looking up from her phone. The word was drenched in condescension. She talked about corporate law. I wrote freelance articles for online magazines and was 2 years into a novel that felt like it was going nowhere. In her world, if it didn't come with a corner office and a six-figure bonus, it wasn't work. It was a hobby. How is the little novel thingy coming along, anyway? Still staring at a blank page? A hot flush of shame and anger crept up my neck. I had made the mistake of telling them about my dream of being a novelist once. They had latched onto it as yet another adorable, pitiable quirk. It's coming along, I said, stirring my now cold coffee. You have to tell us what it's about. Chloe chirped, showing a rare spark of interest. Is it a romance? You should write a romance. Maybe you could manifest a boyfriend. It's not a romance, I said. Let me guess. Bianca leaned in, her eyes glinting with mischief. It's about a poor, tortured girl from the province who moves to the big city and realizes she doesn't fit in. So she sits in her room all day and writes poetry about our tragic, boring life. The word landed like a punch. Boring. It was their favorite adjective for me. My quiet life was a source of endless fascination and ridicule for them. They, who filled every second of their lives with noise and acquisitions and drama, couldn't comprehend a life of stillness. They mistook my introspection for emptiness. My life isn't boring, Bianca, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Darling, it's not an insult, it's an observation, she said, smiling that razor-sharp smile. We love you for it. You're our grounding force. You remind us of the simple things. Her tone implied the simple things were quaint but ultimately worthless, like handmade doilies in a minimalist condo. But honestly, Clara, what do? You don't date. You don't party. You don't shop. Sometimes I think your big thrill for the week is finding a book on sale. The laughter felt like stones being thrown against glass. I felt myself shrinking, disappearing. I wanted to be back in my apartment. I wanted to be 1,000 miles away, back home in Cybelum, where the air was clean and people's words were not weapons. In that moment, a desperate, foolish urge rose up in me. An urge to prove them wrong, to show them that my boring life had depth, that it had a history, that I was more than just the quiet girl who listened to their stories. My life hasn't always been quiet, I said, and the word surprised even me. They all stopped and looked at me. I had their full, undivided attention for the first time all day. It was intoxicating and terrifying. Oh? Bianca raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Do tell. And so I did. I don't know why. Maybe it was to fill the silence. Maybe it was to reclaim a piece of myself. I told them a story. Not a grand dramatic story, but a small, perfect one from my childhood. When I was about 10, I began, my voice gaining a little strength as I retreated into the memory. My Lolo, my grandfather, was very sick. He had a bad heart, and he spent most of his days in a wheelchair on the porch of our house in Antique. He couldn't work in the fields anymore, and it was killing his spirit. He had been a strong man, a man who worked with his hands his whole life. Now he just sat there, watching the world go by. They were listening, leaning in. For once, they were actually listening. My Lola knew he was fading. So she did something. She went to the market and bought dozens of baby chicks. Tiny, yellow, fluffy things. She brought them home and told my Lolo that they were his new farm, his new responsibility. He had to make sure they had water, that the eagles didn't get them. It was his job. At first he grumbled, said it was foolish woman's work. But then, a few days later, I came out onto the porch, and he had one of the tiny chicks cupped in his big, calloused farmer's hands. He was whispering to it, telling it to grow strong. Every day, he was out there. He'd built them a little coop from scrap bamboo. He'd sit for hours, just watching them, making sure they were safe. He named them all. I smiled, lost in the memory. Those chickens, They gave him a reason to wake up in the morning. They tethered him to the world when he was ready to float away. It wasn't about the chickens, you see. It was about having something to care for, something that needed him. He lived for 2 more years, and my Lola always said it was the chickens that kept him here. I looked at them, my heart feeling raw and exposed. It's my favorite memory. It reminds me that sometimes the smallest, most pointless seeming things are the only things that are actually holding us together. There was a moment of silence, a real one. I saw a flicker of something in Chloe's eyes, genuine emotion. Katrina looked thoughtful. Even Bianca seemed, for a second, to be touched. Wow, Clara, Bianca said softly. That's a beautiful story. I felt a warmth spread through my chest. Maybe I had gotten through. Maybe they finally saw a piece of the real me. The feeling lasted for 2 days. 2 days of foolish, misplaced hope, it was. Tuesday night. I was curled up on my sofa, wrapped in my favorite quilt, a cup of tea going cold beside me. I was mindlessly scrolling through Instagram, a numbing digital ritual. And then I saw it die. It was a post from Bianca. It was a stunning black and white photo of her, looking pensively out of a rain-streaked window. It was the caption that made my blood run cold. Feeling so reflective tonight, she had written. It made me think of my Lolo. He was such a proud, strong man, but near the end, his illness took so much from him. I remember my Lola, in her quiet wisdom, went out and bought him a flock of baby chicks. He grumbled at first, but those little creatures became his reason for being. He'd hold them in his big, gentle hands and tell them to grow strong. It taught me such a powerful lesson as a child. That purpose can be found in the smallest acts of caring. That sometimes the most fragile things are what keep us anchored to this world. Missing him tonight. #family, #legacy, #life lessons, #wisdom. I read it once, then twice, then a third time. She had stolen it. She had taken my memory, my sacred memory of my grandparents, and she had polished it, repackaged it, and slapped her own branding on it for public consumption. She had taken the raw, authentic heart of my story and turned it into sanitized, inspirational content for her feed. My Lolo and my childhood an antique, the dusty porch, the scent of the rain. On the bamboo she had stripped mine my soul for a caption. My story, the comments were a river of praise. B, this is so beautiful. You have such a deep soul. Wow, what a powerful memory. Thanks for sharing. This made me cry. You're such an inspiration. Your grandparents sound like amazing people. Each comment was a fresh stab in the heart. They weren't her grandparents. It wasn't her memory. It was mine. And she had passed it off as her own, without a flicker of hesitation, to an audience of 50,000 strangers. The warmth I had felt at the brunch turned into a cold, hard knot in my stomach. It wasn't just that she had mocked me. That was familiar territory. This was different. This was theft. It was a violation of the most intimate kind. She had looked inside me, found the most precious, vulnerable thing I had, and ripped it out to wear as her own accessory. The years of quiet resentment, of swallowing insults, of forcing smiles, all came to a head in that one silent moment. The dam broke, but it wasn't a flood of tears. It was a flood of ice-cold clarity. These people were not my friends. They were cannibals, and they had just taken their last bite. I looked over at my laptop, sitting on my small writing desk. The screen was dark. For months, the novel had been a source of anxiety, a mountain I felt too weak to climb. But now, looking at it, I felt a new sense of purpose. A dark, thrilling, and powerful purpose. Bianca thought my life was boring. She thought my writing was a cute, pointless hobby. She thought my memories were hers for the taking. She was about to find out just how wrong she was. My life wasn't boring. It was research, and class was officially in session. I picked up the laptop, opened a fresh document, and began to write. But I wasn't writing my old story anymore. I was writing a new one. Theirs. The last thing I saw before I closed Instagram was Bianca's smiling, triumphant face from a post a week prior, a glass of champagne held aloft in a toast. The first thing I did was silence my phone. Not off, just silenced. I muted our group chat, a constant stream of memes and humble brags I now saw as a ticker tape of lies. I muted their individual notifications. I didn't block them. That would be an admission of injury. Instead, I simply relegated them to the digital void, let them scream into the ether. I was no longer listening. My apartment, once a cozy sanctuary, became my headquarters, my war room. The anger didn't manifest as a fiery explosion, but as a cold, methodical focus. The vague idea of writing about them solidified into a concrete battle plan. An author's greatest weapon isn't a pen, it's observation. And I had been observing these women for a decade. I had been their confessor, their sounding board, their invisible friend. They had filled my quiet spaces with their noisy secrets, never once. Imagining I was taking notes, I began the excavation. I pulled out old journals from my university days, their pages filled with my looping cursive. I wasn't looking for my own feelings. I was looking for their words, recorded with a diarist's precision. Beat is terrified her parents will cut her off if she doesn't marry someone they approve of. One entry read. Another, cat cried in the library today, worried she's not smart enough for law school. She made me promise not to tell. And Chloe confessed she feels like a ghost in her own life. Said her money feels like a wall between her and everyone else. It was all there. A decade of their vulnerabilities, freely given and carefully preserved. Then I moved to the digital realm. I scrolled back, years and years, through their social media timelines. I wasn't looking at the curated, smiling photos. I was reading between the lines. I saw Bianca's gushing posts about her perfect relationship, posted just days after a tearful phone call to me where she admitted they hadn't spoken in a week. I saw Katrina's LinkedIn updates about her promotions, knowing they coincided with periods of extreme anxiety and panic attacks she'd only confessed to me. I saw Chloe's photos from exotic locations, her eyes holding a beautiful, tragic emptiness that the captions about being #blessed and #living my best life couldn't conceal. They had built their lives like elaborate stage sets, and I was the only one who had been allowed backstage. I had seen the peeling paint, the cheap props, the stagehands weeping in the wings. I created a new folder on my laptop. I named it Research. I started a document for each of them, populating it with memories, direct quotes, and screenshots. Dates, times, locations. Every casual cruelty, every hypocritical statement, every whispered secret. It was a dossier of their deepest truths and most flamboyant lies. This wasn't just writing, this was intelligence gathering. With the raw material assembled, I began to build my characters, my avatars of revenge. They would be my Trojan horse, beautiful on the outside, filled with devastating truth on the inside. My novel, which I had tentatively titled The Silk Vine, was scrapped. I opened a new document and typed the title, The Glass House, the protagonist. My stand-in would be a quiet, observant artist named Anna who moves through their world. Her brushstrokes capturing the things they tried so desperately to hide. But the true stars of the show would be the women of the Glass House. First, I created Isabel, my masterpiece of rage. My Bianca. On the surface, Isabel would be everything Bianca was. Glamorous, witty, the undisputed queen of her social circle. She would have the perfect husband, the perfect condo, the perfect life, but I would peel back the layers. I would write her inner monologue, a roiling sea of insecurity. I would give her a shopping addiction she hides from her husband, a desperate need for validation that drives her every action. The story about the chickens? Oh, it would be in the book. Isabel would tell it at a dinner party, and my protagonist, Anna, would sit there watching her, knowing it was a lie. I would describe the emptiness in Isabel's eyes as she basked in the unearned praise. I wasn't just going to report Bianca's flaws. I was going to explain them, and in doing so, reduce her from a terrifying monster to something far worse. A pathetic figure. Next came Cassandra. My Katrina. Cassandra would be a brilliant, ruthless corporate lawyer, a woman who wore her ambition like armor. She would be praised for her strength, her take-no-prisoners attitude. But I would write scenes of her alone in her office late at night, not working, but staring at her reflection in the dark window, terrified that she was an imposter, that one day everyone would discover she was just a scared girl from a middle class family who had clawed her way into a world she didn't belong to. I would use Katrina's own words, her own whispered fears about failure, and put them in Cassandra's mouth. I would expose the terror that fueled her ambition. Finally, there was Celeste. My Chloe. I felt a strange pity for Chloe, and Celeste would reflect that. Celeste would float through the novel like a beautiful, tragic ghost. She would have limitless money and zero purpose. I would write about her affairs not as acts of passion, but as desperate, fumbling attempts to feel something, anything. I would describe her collecting things, art, lovers, experiences, but finding joy in none of them. Celeste would be the beautiful, beating, empty heart of the novel, a symbol of the spiritual rot that wealth could not cure. These were not caricatures. They were portraits painted with a truth so brutal it could only be presented as fiction. I knew their voices, their gestures, their favorite brands of champagne, their deepest fears. I would weave it all in, creating a world so vividly real, so uncomfortably familiar, that they would have no choice but to see themselves. And the world would see them too. The writing was a fever. I fell into a rhythm that obliterated time. Days and nights blurred into a single, long stretch of creative fury. My apartment, once my sanctuary, became a cave. The blinds were always drawn. A constellation of empty coffee mugs surrounded my laptop. My diet consisted of instant noodles, toast, and the sweet, intoxicating taste of vengeance. The outside world ceased to exist. The silence foam lay dormant on the counter, a relic from another life. My process was immersive. I'd spend the morning writing as Isabel, channeling Bianca's voice, her cadence, her casual cruelty. I'd write a scene where she belittles a waitress. Then I'd write the subsequent scene where she goes into an empty bathroom and anxiously checks her bank account, terrified her husband will see her latest credit card bill. Then I'd switch to Cassandra. I'd write her eviscerating an opponent in a boardroom, all sharp intellect and power. I'd follow it with a scene of her at home, meticulously arranging her designer shoes in their closet, the only part of her life she felt she could truly control. The words poured out of me. It was like a dam bursting. Every insult I had swallowed, every condescending remark I had endured, every secret I had dutifully kept, it all came out, refined and sharpened into prose. From the glass house, Isabel held court at the center of the table, her laughter like the clinking of ice in an empty glass. She regaled them with a story about her childhood, something about her grandfather and his chickens. It was a beautiful, tender story, and Anna watched, mesmerized as Isabel performed it. She performed it with the effortless grace of a seasoned actress, hitting every emotional beat. But her eyes, even as they feigned a nostalgic tear, were scanning the faces of her audience, checking to see if they were buying it. They always were. I was a method writer, and my method was revenge. Some nights, the sheer toxicity of the world I was creating threatened to overwhelm me. The bitterness, the lies, the casual cruelty. In those moments, I would push back from the keyboard, go to my small kitchen, and cook. I'd make a simple tinoan manok, the way my Lola and Saibalam used to make it, the scent of ginger and lemongrass filling my small apartment. It was a sensory anchor to a world that was real and true, a world without pretense. It was a reminder of what I was fighting for, not just against them, but for the authenticity they had tried to mock and steal. I was grounding myself in my boring life before diving back into the beautiful, ugly fiction of theirs. There were moments of doubt, a flicker of guilt. These were people I had once, a long time ago, considered friends. Was this monstrous? Was I becoming as cruel as them? But then I would remember Bianca's smug, curated post. I would remember the sting of their laughter. I would remember the theft of my Lola's chickens. And the doubt would vanish, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. They had used their power, their money, their status, their social clout to make me feel small. I would use my power, my words, my intellect, my memory to show them what small really felt like. 6 months after I had muted their group chat, I typed the final words of the last chapter. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I reread the last paragraph where Aina, my protagonist, stands on her balcony, looking out over the city lights, having finally decided to leave the glittering, toxic circle for good. She was free. I typed 2 words, the end. I pushed back my chair. The sun was streaming through a gap in the blinds, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. My apartment was a disaster zone of notebooks, empty plates, and scattered clothes. I was exhausted, pale, and thinner than I had been in years. But on my laptop screen was a 350-page, 90,000-word manuscript. It was finished. It was perfect. It was a polished literary bomb, and my finger was on the trigger. A wave of profound, terrifying power washed over me. The quiet girl was done being quiet. I was an author, and I had just written my masterpiece. For a full day after finishing the manuscript, I did nothing. I slept for 14 hours straight, a deep, dreamless sleep of pure exhaustion. When I woke, the apartment was eerily quiet. The manic energy that had propelled me for 6 months was gone, leaving a vacuum in its place. The manuscript sat on my laptop desktop, a single file named the_glass_house_final.docx. It was a monument to my rage, an exquisitely crafted vessel of poison. But a vessel of poison is useless if it just sits on a shelf. The fear came then, not a fear of my friends, but a fear of failure. What if it wasn't good enough? What if no one wanted it? What if my grand act of vengeance was destined to die? On my hard drive, unseen and unread. The thought was more terrifying than any confrontation. My revenge couldn't be a private victory. Its entire purpose was to be a public spectacle. I pushed the fear down and replaced it with strategy. I was a writer. I knew the industry. A manuscript like this, unsolicited and sent to a generic submissions inbox, would be deleted without a second glance. I needed an advocate. I needed a shark. I needed a literary agent. My research became my new obsession. One spent a week buried in online databases, publishing blogs, and the acknowledgement sections of novels I admired. I wasn't looking for just any agent. I was looking for someone specific, someone known for taking risks, for loving sharp, high-concept fiction with a commercial edge. Someone who wouldn't be afraid of a little controversy. I found her on a Tuesday, Sylvia Reyes, head of her own boutique agency, Reyes Literary. Her bio was short and formidable. Her client list was a mix of award-winning literary darlings and blockbuster thriller writers. She was known for her fierce negotiation skills and her impeccable taste. Her website had an interview where she said, "I'm not looking for quiet. Stories. I'm looking for books that grab you by the throat. I knew. She was the one. Crafting the query letter was like performing surgery. Every word had to be perfect. I didn't frame it as a revenge story. I framed it as a literary peek into a hidden world. Dear Ms. Reyes, I wrote, my fingers trembling slightly, in the glittering, glass-walled towers of modern Manila. A group of elite socialites navigate a world of wealth, power, and influence. They're the city's darlings, their lives curated to perfection for public consumption. But behind the shimmering facade of their friendship lies a tangled web of secrets, betrayals, and quiet desperation. The only person who knows the truth is the one they all ignore. Anna, the quiet artist they keep in their circle as a mascot. The Glass House is a 90,000-word, upmarket fiction novel that explores the dark side of female friendship and the hidden rot beneath the surface of high society. When the women's carefully constructed world begins to shatter, their secrets, the crippling debt, the loveless affairs, the corporate fraud are exposed one by one, forcing them to confront the ugly truth of who they are. Told from the perspective of the silent observer who holds all their secrets, the novel is a literary thriller in the vein of a contemporary, The Bonfire of the Vanities. Set against the vibrant, ruthless backdrop of Manila, I am a freelance writer with numerous publications. Thank you for your time and consideration. I attached the first 50 pages, took a deep breath, and hit send. The email shot out into the digital void. All I could do now was wait. The wait was its own special kind of hell. Every ping from my phone sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I tried to work on freelance articles, but my focus was shot. I kept my friends muted. I assumed they thought I was having some sort of depressive episode, a retreat into my boring life. Little did they know I was waiting for a match. To catch, 2 weeks later, an email landed in my inbox. The sender was Sreyes. At breezeliterary.com. My heart stopped. The email was 5 words long. Please send the full manuscript. I have no memory of the 24 hours after that. I know I sent the full manuscript immediately. I know I didn't sleep. I just paced my apartment, a caged, hopeful animal. The call came the next afternoon. Is this Clara Santos? The voice on the phone was crisp, professional, and radiated an energy that could power a small city. Yes, this is she. Sylvia Reyes, I read your book. I held my breath. I read it in one sitting. I canceled 3 meetings and ignored my husband. I haven't done that in 5 years. She paused. This book is a goddamn goldmine, Miss Santos. It's vicious, it's smart, and it's unpardonable. Tears of relief pricked my eyes. Thank you, I managed to choke out. One question for you, and be honest with me, she said her voice turning serious. Is this a Roman McClef? Are these characters based on real people? This was the moment. The critical test. As a writer, Ms. Reyes, I said, choosing my words with care, I draw inspiration from the world around me. The book is a work of fiction, but I believe it is a work of fiction that feels intensely, universally true. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, then a sharp bark of laughter. Good answer, very good answer. I want to represent you. I'm sending you our standard agreement. Read it over. Have a lawyer look at it if you want. But know this, I am going to sell the hell out of this book. Sylvia Reyes was a force of nature. Within a month, she had a polished proposal and had submitted The Glass House to the Big 5 publishing houses in the country. The feedback was almost instantaneous. Editors were emailing her within days, clamoring to read the full manuscript. A week after submission, we had our first offer. The day after that, 2 more. It turned into a full-blown bidding war. I'd be at my desk, trying to write a fluffy article about skincare trends, and Sylvia would call me with updates. National Books is in. They're offering a 60,000 peso advance. Wait, scratch that. Amble Publishing just came in at 80. Penguin Random House wants to set up a meeting. They're talking a six-figure advance and a major marketing budget. It was surreal. These were numbers, these were names that I had only ever dreamed of. They weren't just buying a book. They were buying the scandal. They were buying the sizzle. They were buying my revenge. The final offer came from the biggest, most respected publisher in the country. It was an offer that would change my life. I accepted without hesitation. The next few months were a blur of activity. There were edits, of course, but they were minor. My editor, a sharp woman named Joanna, loved the book. Her only notes were to make the insults sharper, the secrets more devastating. She was honing the blade for me. Then came the meetings with the marketing and publicity teams. I sat in a sleek, glass-walled boardroom, surrounded by a dozen of the smartest marketing minds in business. Okay, Clara, we're obsessed with this book. The head of marketing, a man named David, said, "The writing is superb, but the hook. My God, the hook is a killer." He turned to a large monitor. "This is our campaign concept." The title, The Glass House, appeared on the screen in elegant, shattered letters. Underneath it, a tagline, "Some secrets are made to be broken." We're going to lean into the mystery, David explained. The roaming a clef angle is our golden ticket. We'll be seeding rumors in the right gossip columns, sending advance copies to the most influential bookstagrammers and socialites. We're not going to say it's a true story. We're just going to ask the question, which of Manila's elite will see themselves in the pages of The Glass House? It was perfect. They were going to do my work for me. They would build the buzz, create the intrigue, and point the finger of suspicion without me ever having to say a word. The campaign was deliciously, maliciously brilliant. As the publication date, set for 9 months after I signed the contract, drew closer, the buzz began to build, just as they'd planned. Literary blogs wrote speculative pieces. The cover, a minimalist, artistic shot of a cracked champagne. Flute was revealed to great acclaim. People were talking. The title was on the tip of everyone's tongue in the circles that mattered. It was a distant rumble of thunder, the promise of a coming storm. My friends, I knew, were blissfully unaware. They didn't read literary blogs. Their world was too small, too self-obsessed. They had no idea the tidal wave that was about to crash down on them. 2 weeks before the official release date, a large, heavy box arrived at my apartment. My hands trembled as I sliced it open. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, were 20 copies of my book. My book, The Glass House by Clara Santos. My name, an elegant print on a real, solid, beautiful cover. I lifted one out. It felt sacred, heavy with the weight of my secrets and theirs. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I spent that evening preparing the packages. I chose 3 of the most pristine copies. For the first, I opened it to the title page. I took my best pen and wrote, "To Bianca, my greatest muse. I truly couldn't have written this without you. All my love, Clara." For the second, to Katrina, for all the late-night talks and glasses of wine that sparked so many ideas. I'm so grateful for your insights. With love, Clara Dot. And the third, to Chloe, for showing me that beauty has its own, often, heartbreaking story to tell. Thank you for your vulnerability. Love, Clara Dot. The words were honey sweet and laced with arsenic. Every compliment was a perfectly aimed dagger. Every line of gratitude was a reminder of their unwitting confessions. They would read these inscriptions and preen, their egos stroked. They would feel seen and celebrated. They would open the book expecting a flattering tribute to their glamorous lives. They had no idea they were opening a beautifully designed, professionally edited declaration of war. The next morning, I took the 3 carefully wrapped packages to a courier service. I watched as the clerk put the shipping labels on them, addressing them to 3 of the most exclusive condominiums in the city. The trap was set. The missiles were launched. I walked out into the Manila sun, feeling a strange and terrible calm. The quiet girl was done. The writer had done her work. Now, all that was left was to wait for the sound of the glass shattering. The week after I sent the packages was a strange, suspended limbo. It was the quiet before the storm, and I spent it fortifying my defenses. I tidied my apartment, bought groceries, and paid my bills. I called my mother in Sibalom and talked about the weather and the price of fish. Her calm, steady voice a balm to my frayed nerves. I was preparing for an impact, shoring up the ordinary, mundane parts of my life before the extraordinary chaos I had engineered was unleashed. The first tremor came via Instagram. It was a post from Chloe, a picture of my book artfully placed, next to a vase of peonies and a steaming cup of tea. The caption was effusive. I can finally share. My incredibly talented friend at Claire Santis has written a book, and it's absolutely stunning. I was so honored to receive an advance copy. Can't wait to dive in and see if I recognize anyone. So proud of you, Clara. Everyone go pre-order The Glass House now. She tagged Bianca and Katrina. A few hours later, the post appeared in Bianca's story. A boomerang of her clinking the book against a glass of wine. So proud of our little author, at Claire Santis is a star. She wrote, followed by a dozen sparkling emojis. Katrina, ever the pragmatist, just posted a clean shot of the cover to her story with the words, a must read. Congratulations, at ClaraSantis. Double quotes, they were thrilled. They were proud. They were publicly hitching their wagons to my star, eager to claim a piece of my success. The dramatic irony was so thick I could have choked on it. I watched their posts, a cold, clinical satisfaction spreading through me. They were building the scaffold for their own execution. They were telling the world to watch, ensuring everyone had a front row seat for their spectacular fall from grace. I took a screenshot of every single post. Ammunition for a war they didn't even know had been declared. I imagined Chloe being the first to actually read it. She had the most time on her hands, after all. I pictured her curled up on a divan in her sprawling, minimalist condo, a cashmere blanket draped over her legs. She would have started with a sense of pleasant curiosity, pleased by the inscription I'd written. I imagined her meeting the character of Celeste first. From the glass house, Celeste moved through the world as if underwater. Her beauty was a heavy, gilded cloak, her wealth a silent, insulating sea. She bought things, art, clothes, lovers, the way a drowning person. Gasps for air, each new acquisition a momentary distraction from the profound, crushing emptiness of her own lungs. She was the most beautiful, most envied, and most desperately lonely woman Anna had ever known. I could see Chloe's brow furrowing, a faint, uncomfortable flutter in her chest. It wasn't an accusation, not yet. It was just a mirror, reflecting, an image she had spent her entire life trying not to see. I pictured her sending the first text to their group chat, the first pebble that starts the avalanche. Chloe, hey girls. Started Clara's book. It's interesting. Bianca, darling, don't. Tell me anything. No spoilers. Is it fabulous? Chloe, it's beautifully written. But there's this one character, Celeste. It's a bit strange. She feels familiar. Katrina, I figured, would be next. She'd read it on her tablet during her commute, snatching pages between legal briefs and hostile emails. She would be impatient with the descriptive prose, eager to get to the plot. And then she would get to the chapter on Cassandra, from the Glass House. Cassandra's ambition was a religion. She worshipped at the altar of success, her billable hours a form of prayer. She was a shark in a tailored suit, and she had never lost a case. But Anna knew her secret. Anna had them there one night after too much Chardonnay when the armor had cracked. Sometimes I feel like I'm going to be found out, Cassandra had whispered, her voice a raw nerve. Like I'm just a girl playing dress up in a world of giants, and one day they'll all point and laugh. The fear of being exposed as an imposter was the engine that drove her, and it was driving her straight off a cliff. I could feel Katrina's blood run cold. That quote, it was verbatim. It was from a night 2 years ago after she'd lost a junior associate she had been mentoring to another firm. She had been devastated, drunk, and terrified. And I had been the one she called. I had been her silent, absorbent confidant. Her text to the group chat would be sharper, more panicked. Katrina. Okay, I'm reading the book now. Chloe, you're right. This is weird. The lawyer, Cassandra? It's not just familiar. It's specific. Bianca, what are you two talking about? It's fiction. Clara has a great imagination. Stop being so paranoid. Katrina. Bianca, she quotes something. Something I told her in private. Word for word, a digital silence would fall over the group chat. The paranoia would begin its insidious creep. They would start messaging each other. Privately, a frantic cross-examination. Did you ever tell her about my debt? Did she know about my affair? How did she know that? The foundation of their friendship, a shared, unspoken agreement to maintain their public facades, would begin to crack. They trusted each other with the truth, but they had trusted me with it too, never seeing me as a player in the game, only as a spectator. The spectator who remembered everything. Bianca, of course, would be the last to understand. She was too arrogant, too self-absorbed. She would pick up the book with a smug sense of ownership, ready to be entertained. She would read my inscription, my greatest muse, and she would smile, believing it utterly. She would skim the parts about Celeste and Cassandra, mildly amused by her friend's paranoia. And then she would get to chapter 4, the dinner party. The scene where the glamorous, powerful, universally adored Isabel tells a beautiful, poignant story about her grandfather and his chickens. The blood would drain from her face. It wouldn't be a vague similarity. It would be my story. My Lola, my porch and antique. The rhythm of the sentences, the choice of words. It would be a perfect, damning echo of the story I had told at brunch, now placed in the mouth of her fictional avatar. This would be the moment the paranoia crystallized into cold, hard certainty. This was not an accident. This was not inspiration. This was a declaration. This was an attack. Her hands trembling with rage, she would flip through the rest of the book, hunting for herself in the pages. And she would find herself. Oh, she would find herself everywhere. From the glass house. Isabel's life was a masterpiece of curation. Her marriage, a business arrangement presented as a grand passion. Her friendships, a series of strategic alliances. Her very personality, a mosaic of interesting traits and anecdotes she had collected from other people. The way she collected designer handbags. She was terrified of being boring, and so she had become something worse. A beautiful, sparkling, hollow vessel. Anna often wondered if there was anything real left inside at all. She would read about Isabel's secret credit card debt, a detail Bianca had tearfully confessed to me one night when her husband had threatened to cut her off. She would read about Isabel's affair with a tennis pro, a secret she thought only Chloe knew. She would read the descriptions of her inner thoughts, her deepest insecurities, her desperate, clawing need to be admired. It was a psychological autopsy, and she was laid bare on the table for all the world to see. The book wasn't just an expose of her actions, it was an expose of her soul. And it was a bestseller. And her name was on the first page, in my handwriting, calling her a muse. The call came on a Saturday afternoon. My phone, which had been silent for weeks, suddenly erupted with a video call notification. It was the group chat. I let it ring for a moment, savoring the panic I knew was on the other end. Then, with a deep, calming breath, I answered. Their three faces popped up on my screen, a triptych of fury and betrayal. They were in Bianca's living room, huddled together around her phone. Bianca was in the center, her face blotchy and red, her eyes narrowed into slits of pure hatred. Katrina looked pale and furious, her jaw clenched. Chloe was openly weeping, her face a mess of mascara and disbelief. How could you? Bianca shrieked, her voice shrill and ugly. There was no silken blade now, only a rusty shiv. I adopted an expression of mild, concerned confusion. Bianca, what's wrong? What's happened? Don't you play innocent with us, you snake? Katrina spat. The glass house. We read. Oh, I said, my voice light. Did you like it? I was so nervous about what you all would think. Like it? Chloe sobbed. Clara, how could you write those things? About Celeste? About her being so empty? Chloe, it's a fictional character, I said, my voice gentle and soothing. It's not you. Why would you think that was you? Because it is us. Bianca screamed, snatching the phone closer. Every page, you put everything in there. Our conversations. Our secrets. Things we told you in confidence because we thought you were our friend. I'm a writer, Bianca, I said calmly, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm of triumph. I'm an observer. I take inspiration from the world around me. The book is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. I was quoting the disclaimer page from my own novel. The beauty of it was almost too much to bear. Coincidental? Katrina laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. You wrote about my panic attacks. You quoted the exact words I said to you. How is that a coincidence? I'm sorry you feel that way, Kat, I said, my voice dripping with faux sympathy. I guess great artists just tap into universal truths. The fear of being an imposter is a very common anxiety among high-achieving women. Bianca looked like she was about to explode. And the chickens, Clara? She hissed. Was that a universal truth, too? You stole my story and gave it to that pathetic, insecure monster, Isabel. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of her lie left me breathless. She had stolen my story, and now she was accusing me of stealing it back. Your story? I asked, letting a note of genuine confusion enter my voice. Bianca, that story. It's about my Lolo, from my childhood, in Cybalom. I told you that? Story at brunch, remember? She stared at me, speechless. In her rage, she had forgotten her own theft. She had so completely absorbed my memory as her own that my reclaiming of it felt like an attack. You twisted our lives into this. This ugly, disgusting caricature, she finally managed to say. You spied on us. You used us. I let the silence hang for a moment. I looked at their three faces, contorted with a rage born of pure terror. The terror of being seen, truly deeply seen for the first time in their lives. The power had shifted so completely it was almost dizzying. They were no longer the witty, glamorous women at the fancy cafe. They were just flawed, frightened people, stripped of their armor, and they were furious with the person who had held up the mirror. The book comes out on Tuesday. I said finally, my voice as quiet and calm as the eye of a hurricane. It's already in its third printing. The reviews have been wonderful. There's even been some interest from a film studio. The blood drained from their faces. The scope of their ruin was finally dawning on them. This wasn't just a book, it was a cultural event. And they were the unwilling subjects. I have to go, I said, as if I had another, more important call waiting. It was good to hear from you all. Clara, wait. Bianca shrieked, a desperate, pleading note entering her voice. You can't, we'll sue you for defamation, for slander. I gave them a small, sad smile. Sue me for what? I asked, For writing a book, it's fiction. And besides, I added, delivering the final killing blow. To sue me, you'd have to stand up in a court of law and admit that all the ugly secret things I wrote about are true. Their faces crumpled. Checkmate. Goodbye, I said softly, and I ended the call. I stared at the black screen of my phone. Silence. My heart was calm. My hands were steady. My revenge was complete. It was everything I had hoped for. It was perfect. And it was just the beginning. The Tuesday my book was officially released felt like the day after a typhoon. An eerie, watchful quiet, the calm of a world holding its breath. I stayed in my apartment, phone on silent, watching the storm make landfall from a safe distance. By noon, it was a trending topic. By 3 p.m., it was the #1 news story in the country. The Glass House wasn't just a book. It was a national obsession. It sold out in major bookstores before lunchtime. My publisher, ecstatic, ordered an emergency reprint of 50,000 copies. The book was a blockbuster, a juggernaut, a phenomenon, and it was a bloodbath. The media frenzy was everything my publicist had dreamed of and more. Talk shows convened panels of psychologists and social commentators to debate the toxic dynamics of modern female friendships. Lifestyle magazines ran features titled, "Are You a Celeste?" Gossip columnists had a field day, publishing blurry photos of Bianca, Katrina, and Chloe alongside lengthy articles speculating, with barely veiled certainty on the real-life identities of Isabel, Cassandra, and Celeste. The phrase, "she got the glass house treatment," entered the National lexicon overnight, a new term for a public literary execution. I watched it all unfold with a kind of detached fascination. I saw photos of Bianca, snapped by paparazzi, looking haggard and thin in oversized sunglasses, a stark contrast to her usual polished perfection. An anonymous source close to the family leaked to a major newspaper that her husband, a man whose family valued privacy above all else, was humiliated by the public airing of their marital strife and her secret debts. He had moved out. Divorce lawyers, the article gleefully reported, had been contacted. Bianca's lifestyle consultancy website was taken down, her social media accounts deactivated. She had become a ghost. Katrina's downfall was quieter but no less devastating. Her law firm, a bastion of old-world masculine tradition, was deeply embarrassed. The depiction of Cassandra as a brilliant but terrified imposter riddled with anxiety undermined the image of unshakable strength they cultivated. She was quietly removed from a high-profile murder case she had been slated to lead. Her ambition, the thing she had sacrificed everything for, had been crippled by the very words she had confessed to me in a moment of weakness. She had been exposed not as a shark, but as a scared fish, and the other sharks in her tank were merciless. Chloe's fate was perhaps the most tragic. Her family, a powerful and intensely private dynasty, was horrified. Their carefully guarded world had been breached, their daughter depicted as a beautiful, empty vessel of their wealth. They whisked her away out of the country to recover from the stress. Her vibrant Instagram feed, a colorful tapestry of exotic travels and designer goods, went dark. The last photo was of my book next to a cup of tea. It felt like an epitaph. They didn't sue. Of course they didn't. Their threats were as hollow as their friendships. To sue would be to confess. Their only option was to disappear, to hope the world would forget, but the world wouldn't forget. I had made them immortal in the worst possible way. I had turned their lives into literature, and literature lasts. My own life, in contrast, exploded into the light. I was no longer the quiet girl, the invisible friend. I was Clara Santos, the literary star. My publisher booked me on the country's top-rated late-night talk show. I sat on a plush sofa opposite a host famous for his probing questions, the studio audience buzzing with anticipation. Clara, welcome. Your book, The Glass House, is a certified phenomenon, the host began. It's brilliant, it's insightful, but let's be honest, everyone is asking the same question. Is it true? I smiled, a calm, practiced expression I had perfected in the mirror. It's a work of fiction, I said, my voice even, but I believe it's emotionally true. I think the dynamics of friendship, the pressures women face, the gap between our public lives and our private selves, those are real experiences that many people can relate to. But the details, he pressed, leaning forward, they're incredibly specific. The social circles of BGC, the corporate law firms of Makati, the old money families. The rumor is that you are writing about your own former friends. A writer's job is to be a good observer, I said, sidestepping neatly. Manila is a vibrant, complex city filled with fascinating people. I had a lot of material to draw from, and the character of Isabel, he continued, is a scathing portrait. Some are calling it one of the most devastating takedowns of a socialite figure in modern literature. Was she inspired by anyone in particular? I paused, letting the silence hang. Isabel is a tragic figure to me, I said softly, my voice now full of the same faux sympathy I had used on the phone call. She's a woman who is so terrified of being herself that she becomes a collection of other people's stories. I don't see her as a monster, I see her as a warning. The interview is a triumph. I came across as intelligent, poised, and enigmatic. My refusal to confirm or deny the rumors only fanned the flames higher. The book sold another 100,000 copies that week. I was lauded for my brave and unflinching voice. The irony was dizzying. For years I had been silent, and they had called me boring. Now I had finally spoken, and they were calling me a genius, but the victory was disorienting. My life was suddenly filled with noise. Interviews, photo shoots, literary festivals. People wanted to be my friend, to be seen with me, to whisper their secrets in my ear, hoping to make it into the sequel. I had become the thing I had despised, a commodity. My quiet life had been replaced by a loud, demanding, public one. I had destroyed their glass house, only to find myself trapped in a new one, built of fame and expectation. I had won, but I wasn't happy. I wasn't at peace. Revenge had been a destination, but I had never planned for what I would do once I arrived. One evening, sitting in my Manila apartment, the city lights twinkling below, the noise of the traffic a constant, dull roar, I realized the truth. The point of my revenge was not to join their world on my own terms. It was to earn the right, to leave it entirely. The money from my book, the thing I had never cared about, was now the most important thing in the world. It wasn't just money. It was an escape hatch. I thought of home. Not this apartment, but home, Sibalom, the green mountains, the smell of rain on the rice paddies, the sound of my mother's laughter, the authentic, simple, boring life they had mocked so relentlessly. It called to me, a quiet, insistent whisper beneath the roar of my new fame. The decision, when it came, was easy. I called Sylvia, my agent. I called Joanna, my editor. I told them I would not be writing a sequel. I would fulfill my publicity obligations for the paperback release, but after that, I was disappearing. They were disappointed, but understood. The enigmatic author retreating from the spotlight at the height of her fame. It was a brilliant marketing move, even if I didn't mean it as one. I took the money, a sum so large it felt like fiction itself, and I bought a piece of the earth. It was 5 hectares of rolling land just outside the town proper of Sibalom, with a stream running through it and a view of the distant blue mountains. I hired a local architect, a young woman with brilliant ideas, and together we designed. My house, not a mansion, not a palace. A small modern home inspired by the Bahay Kubo, built with bamboo and glass and dark local wood. It had a wide wraparound porch for watching sunrises and a small, soundproof study with a single, large window that looked out onto nothing but green. The construction took a year. During that time, the frenzy around the glass house slowly faded, as all frenzies do, leaving behind only the solid, enduring fact of the book itself, a permanent fixture on bookstore shelves and university reading lists. My old friends never resurfaced. They became footnotes in my story, cautionary tales whispered at parties. I never heard from them again. I never wanted to. It is Sunday, the 27th of July, 2025. I am sitting on the porch of my finished house. It's late, just after 9 in the evening, and the air is cool and smells of damp earth and night-blooming jasmine. A chorus of cicadas and frogs provides the evening soundtrack. My dog, a scruffy Ascol I named Bagoy, is asleep at my feet. On the table next to me is a cup of herbal tea, and my laptop thought my life is exquisitely, profoundly boring. I wake up with the sun. I drink coffee on this porch. I walk with my dog through the fields. I visit my mother in town. I read, and I write. I am working on a new novel. It's not about revenge. It's not about anger. It's a story about a grandfather and his chickens. It's about finding purpose in small things. It is my story, and this time no one can steal it. The rage that fueled me is gone. The hollow ache of revenge has been filled with something better. Peace. The satisfaction I feel now isn't the hot, sharp thrill of watching my enemies fall. It is the deep, quiet, steady joy of watching my garden grow, of writing a sentence that feels true, of breathing clean air. They thought this life was prison, a mark of failure. They were wrong. This quiet, this stillness, this boring existence, it is the ultimate luxury. It is the spoils of my war. It is freedom. I look up from my laptop, out at the dark, sleeping mountains under a sky littered with stars, and I smile. Not a triumphant, gloating smile, not the smile of a winner, just the simple, peaceful smile of a woman who is finally, truly home. The last laugh wasn't a laugh at all. It was just a quiet, contented sigh.